2 o'clock on Monday, the 25th of October. Welcome to the Cabinet meeting for the Vale of Glamorgan. May I remind you, everyone present, that the meeting is being live streamed, as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording archived for future viewing, as you all very well know. Okay, next, the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence, and as I can see, everyone's here. There are none. Next item is the minutes of the previous meeting. Can I ask for anybody would prepare to move them as a correct minute, please?
I'm happy to move, Leader.
Thank you very much. Is that agreed by everybody?
Yes.
Good. Thank you very much. Next item is item 4, which is a reference from the Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee.
Excuse me, Leader. Item 3, declarations of interest.
I'm terribly sorry. I do it all the time. Item 3. To receive declarations of interest, if there are any. I don't think there are any, and that's probably why I did it. However, for the record. Right, sorry. Item 4 is the Active Travel Network statutory consultation process. It's a reference from Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee of the 21st of September. I know, Peter, you're going to take this one. There are some comments that came from there, which maybe we should just note, if nothing else. Peter.
Yes, please, Leader. I just asked the Cabinet to note, but what I would ask is that any residents who view this, I would encourage them to take a look at the maps. Best way of accessing them is from the council website and then look up active travel, because they are our aspirations, our plan, our hope fors and all the rest of it. And when it comes down to funding, it will be hugely informed by where there's the greater levels of support. So if there's an active travel route near you, please pin your little rosette thingy and endorse it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. As it says, the active travel arrangements are for Barry, Cowbridge, Dinas-Powys, Llanfydd Major, Penarth, Rhys, St Athan and Sully. So it isn't actually everywhere, but it's the majority of places. And I noticed that during the meeting, they highlight some things like the removal of trees, which were causing issues to active travel. And obviously there is a strategy. It does quote as we need a strategy for replacement of trees, which I think is actually in place anyway. And obviously they were talking about a more holistic approach to encourage greater use of cycle lanes, which we obviously would endorse, and that they're clearly supported the link between Barry and Dinas-Powys. There was also a comment in relation to the speed limits on rural roads, but I think that is something that is maybe outside our control in some respects. But the point is, we have other consultations going on in relation to 20 mile an hour. So at the moment, I guess we note the recommendations that come from us, but bearing in mind and knowing that our active travel arrangements are pretty secure. But as Peter says, everybody can get involved. Peter, sorry.
Yeah, Lead, if I just come back on that, the comment about 20 miles an hour is actually highly topical. My officers are incredibly busy at the moment looking at the maps for that. And if all goes to plan, that Wales is looking to introduce 20 miles per hour across the whole, pretty much the whole nation, whereas currently 30. And I like to think that will help with some active travel measures. So it is progressing from all fronts. Thanks.
Yeah, and there was a consultation which I think is probably finished now. There was a consultation document from Welsh Government, wasn't it, that people could respond to.
Yes, and then there'll be another one once we've got our maps sorted. Okay,
good. So we'll note the comments made, but being assured that we are actively travelling as much as we can. Okay, the next item is item 5, which is a reference from the Governance and Audit Committee of the 23rd of September. It is in relation to the Corporate Risk Register Q1. I would remind you that there is also on the agenda today at Agenda 8 a report to this. But it did talk about the risk analysis, which was incorporated in the report, which was Appendix A to this report, and indeed the one later. It highlights the fact there are 16 corporate risks. They also refer to experiences in energy cost prices in terms of gas prices, and also looked at ways of finding to mitigate any impact. Also in relation to health and social care, because clearly the population is growing older, and that is also a risk to the way that we actually spend money. There was also a reference to workforce needs, but that has clearly been addressed by senior management team, as it said. So basically, the committee noted the report. They made some comments, which I've just referred to, and in fact, they asked for an updated reporting quarter to contain greater focus and attentions on the implications as a result of the current energy crisis and challenges related to gas supply, which is a fair comment, I think. And they also asked for challenges in relation to health and social care, because clearly we have an older generation and we need to address that too. But that is a reference from them. We will be taking it later. So can I note the comments that are made within it, except the fact that we do need to keep an eye on both gas and elderly residents, and be assured that the workforce needs are being addressed. So can I ask somebody to second that, please?
I'll formally second, Leader.
Thank you very much. Next item is item 6, which is the Cardiff Bay Advisory Committee minutes. I know that Liz attends this anyway, and I noticed there was a particular concentration in terms of the debate on the Penarth Headland link. I don't, and obviously in relation to e-bikes. Liz, you want to make any comment in relation to this? But they are technically for noting.
Yes, I think that's suitable. I think it was a very useful update on Cardiff Bay Barrage, and also, I mean, it's one of those committees I thoroughly enjoy being a member of it, because it's all those sorts of queries that you think of when you're walking across the barrage and think, well, I wonder what's happening with the fish pass these days, or what's happening with the oxygen level of the water, and all that sort of stuff is covered in this, so it makes it a really interesting one, and also, it's an interesting report. So yes, I would be happy to move we note.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll happily second that. Is that agreed by everyone? Yes, good. Thank you. Next item is item 7. Which is Project Zero. It's just to make Cabinet aware, if you weren't already, the progress being made to develop the Council's approach to delivering Project Zero, which is the Climate Change Challenge Plan. Obviously, it proposes, this report in particular, proposes a governance arrangements for Project Zero. And as part of those governance arrangements, the board has been established to move forward the Climate Change Challenge Plan, and an initial project plan has been developed. The board has considered the challenges associated with the details in the plan, and the senior reporting officers have been tasked with developing necessary arrangements to progress something within their responsibility. Currently, the board is meeting every 2 months, but also the board will also ensure that they undertake a part of the Project Zero lines to the nature emergency declared by the Council in July. There are some recommendations, but I will just highlight the fact that the Council did resolve a climate emergency on the 29th of July 2019, that the Project Zero is our response to that climate emergency. It hasn't gone as fast as we could have done because of COVID-19, but that is still progressing and work continues. We also, at the council meeting, agreed in July this year a climate change plan, challenge plan, and that details 18 challenges. So they are all reflected within the council's corporate plan, and it also includes commitment to work to reduce organisations' carbon emission to a net zero by 2030, and to encourage others to do the same. Clearly, we know the corporate plan is supported by the annual delivery plan, and that just to move forward from where we were in July, the motion was also passed to declare a nature emergency, and they're covered within the report itself. So this is basically an effective response, as far as we can see, to the coordinated response. It will also coordinate with the community, town and community councils, but also the Public Service Board, who've got their own strategy in place too. There are details of the council's key strategies on paragraph 2.5 within the report, which I will not read out. And it's just important to realise that the challenge plan doesn't actually replace the statutory plans and other statutory responsibilities. So clearly we have that on top of it. As I said, there are governance arrangements being developed. They're shown within the report at Appendix A, and they reflect a new focus to the reshaping programme too. So it's following on things that which we know. As I said, the board's been established. It's got 18 challenges. They will be reporting the meeting on a 2-monthly basis. They will report back to us, and their project brief is accompanied to this report at Appendix B. And as I said, we will be working along with other commitments. So basically, we have some recommendations. We are moving forward, and I'm asking that the Cabinet approves the governance arrangements, which are at Appendix A, that the Cabinet also endorses the project brief, which is at Appendix B, and that we consider ways forward for delivering Project Zero. And I think probably we would endorse the recommendations within the report. We also note the project board will ensure the alignment within the nature emergency declared too, and that the Cabinet refers this report to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee and the Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee for consideration. And that finally, that we endorse the proposals that this report is distributed to all members for their information. And I guess we could also send them to the town and community councils for their information too. I think that would probably be a good way forward, and possibly just a completeness to the Public Service Board, as we are aligning within their own reports too. I see two hands up, and I don't know who came first. I will go to Ben first.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to highlight, and I think it's a really good report. I think it lays out the challenge that we have. But under 2.5 in the report, there's a long list of all the different strategies and areas the council works in. And I think it's really important that we reflect that actually it takes us, and the points made in the report, integrating and challenging ourselves against these items to really drive down and work toward what Project Zero is about. And I think this is also the appropriate time to talk about the fact that it doesn't mean stopping everything. It's about adapting how we do things. There are still going to be buildings built in the Vale of Glamorgan, and there are still going to be areas where planning comes in, where there's going to have to be a complicated decision process and an understanding of how to most effectively deal with those issues. But I think it's what lens we look through things at and how we justify those decisions, whether they be our HR strategy, how we do things digitally, what we do with our transport infrastructure, or indeed what happens with a refresh of the local development plan beyond 2026. And I think this report lays out those challenges, how we're going to govern them. And I think this is an excellent document to really set us on the right journey. And I'm happy to support that, and I'll leave my colleagues to second it. But I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, Ben. I think it's important to say that it doesn't mean to say if you're following this, we have to stop and change everything we do, because clearly, and the point I made was we still have our statutory responsibilities too, and we have to address those in conjunction with Project Zero itself. Liz.
Thank you, Leader, and thanks, Ben, for those comments. I'm really pleased that this report has come forward, and for me, what it shows is how the process that we're going through to embed these important areas into our work. You know, it's very easy to put a tick box at the end of reports and say, have you considered climate emergency or climate change? But it's a completely different thing to embed it into all our working. And I think this is what shows, because when we first brought the climate emergency motion to council, and people said, so what's it going to mean? And the point is that those sorts of motions helped to change the policy of the council, which then helped to change the ways in which we work. And this actually demonstrates exactly that process. going forward to enable us to consider all those things. And I thought it was really interesting when Ben said about, you know, it doesn't mean we're going to stop building houses, because at the end of the day, people still need somewhere to live. But I think, you know, listening to Peter talk about sort of change over to LED lights, it's one of those things where we still light our roads, but we light them with LED lights now. It's those sorts of considerations. So I'm really, really pleased that this report has come forward, and I would be delighted to second, Leader.
Good, thank you. And yes, and it is important. And the other thing is, of course, we have lots of other engagement, and we need to engage with the youth service and engage with young people because they're our future after all. But there's also lots of, you know, community groups who need to go forward. And one of the other things that we do in terms of this, don't forget, is our house building program, which has a zero carbon footprint, and trying to make it as economic to run as possible, in the same way as building new schools. So, you know, it's about carrying on what you're doing and what you have to do, but to do in a slightly different way to actually meet the Project Zero criteria. So I think it's important. Liz, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I just wanted to come back. Never allow me to not be given an opportunity to plug the 21st Century Schools programme, but now I can actually plug the 21st Century Schools programme and our forthcoming zero carbon in use school. So I think, again, we say we build schools, but actually we'll do our very best to make them zero carbon.
Indeed, and that the same way in some of the houses that we're currently building too. So it's really good. It's a big ask. It's a you know, let's be fair, it is a big ask, but we can only do what we're doing, and we're happy to endorse the recommendations. Yes, good, thank you. The next item is item 8, which is a corporate risk register Q1, and I will refer back to the reference that we had earlier. This is simply to update us on Q1 position from April to June, and it does show the corporate risk analysis within the corporate risk register, and it's got a corporate risk summary, which is appended in Appendix A. The corporate risk reported A, as I said, is split into sections, and you can see the sections which are covered within the report from paragraph 2.2 to paragraph 2.7. It also talks about the 16 risks on the register, which we know about, 2 of which are always in constant flux, one being Brexit, one being COVID-19. And it does talk in some respects, because if you think about it, this is Q1, which takes us up to June. And it does talk about the fact that in terms of COVID-19, that there's been a successful programme which we hoped would reduce infections. It has, in many respects, reduced infections, but clearly COVID-19 is still with us. And you can see what's happened during that time. Welsh Government also targeted to ease restrictions, and again, that's covered in the report from paragraph 213 to 218. And clearly, what we have to remember is that because the risks are still high and still prevalent, that there may still have to be some easing of those restrictions, and also some sort of reinstatement of some of those restrictions. So it's something which we need to bear in mind. In terms of COVID too, we also have to remember that we've had extra money from Welsh Government, £48 million, 40 million allocated to local authorities, 8 million prioritised for carer support in different ways. As I said, the report is based in June, so the infection rates talk about, they said they've been rising, and clearly they still are rising. But there is success and progress in vaccinations, and indeed, I'm really pleased to see that 12 to 15-year-olds will be included. It does say in the report that 12 to 15-year-olds wish to take up the offer will be vaccinated by the October half term. I think perhaps we missed that deadline, but nevertheless, it will be there and will be available. The report also talks about the other risk, major risk, which is Brexit. Clearly, it talks about the deadline for the EUSS applications. So that's the European Union settlement status. Also one of the things that I like to do, and I hadn't thought about it until I read it in the report, to be honest, is that there are concerns that many EU citizens living in the UK are unaware that children need to have still apply to stay. But thankfully, the Home Office, even though the deadline was the 30th of June, are still accepting grounds for acceptance and applications to be taken in. Clearly, we all know about one of the other risks in terms of Brexit and that's the lorry drivers HGV situations. We've had issues in terms of learning and skills with the loss of European funding, and that has had an effect on us. Talked about neighbourhood and security. We talked earlier about building schools, building houses. Clearly, there's been problems with materials. Cost of materials going up, the distribution of materials, again, related in some respects to drivers. I talked about learning and skills, loss of European social funding, regeneration and planning. Clearly, we've lost some EU funding there too. And in terms of social services, then clearly Brexit has had a marked effect in terms of the number of staff that we can currently have, because I know that many were foreign workers and gone home. And indeed, in terms of, again, we were talking about housing and building houses. Again, there was, in terms of housing, there were still delays. But one of the major things in terms of both housing and in terms of 21st century schools is obviously the increased risk of capital costs. So our capital spend is something we need to look at. So finally, really, I just remind people that at Appendix A is the Q1 risk summary, and at Appendix B that provides a complete corporate risk register. There are, as I said, we did have references earlier which we dealt with, but I think this is quite a comprehensive report, and I don't. And I made the comments I have because I think it's important to do that. But we're asked to note Q1 position of corporate risks for the period April to June, as outlined in Appendix A, and to endorse the corporate risks register for Q1 and the associated corporate risk summary report attached to the report. I've gone on a bit, but can I formally move the recommendations?
I'm formally second, Leader.
Okay, if anybody ask any comments, I think that probably covers most of it, to be honest.
Eddie wanted to come in.
Sorry, Leader.
Oh,
yeah,
I'm sorry, I missed you, Eddie. Sorry.
I left it till you looked down. Sorry about that. Yeah, you're right. It is a comprehensive report, isn't it? And it's a recognition that particularly there's some areas in there, particularly in the executive summary of that, and of some that we will need to look at. You know, I see the workforce as being one of them, and also the safeguarding. There are two areas in particular that just, you know, we just need to caution. There is movement in those, and hopefully they will be able to work something through during this next quarter, because of the pressures that you've just been talking about. There's going to be a time when I'm quoting particularly the planning and the regulatory side of things, particularly the workforce there, that being stretched with all the legislation changes and COVID and everything else. So I'm hoping that will form through as the report indicates that we're looking at. So just comment on that.
No, indeed, I agree. Our workforce is important to us too. Okay, if nobody else got any comments, then we've agreed to the recommendations and we endorse those so far for Q1 and look forward to Q2. And as the reference made, they were looking for some further information in Q2, which I think is quite sensible. Okay, the next item is agenda item 9, which is the use of the Managing Director's emergency powers. It's the normal report, housekeeping report, which brings to us for information and for noting those that have been used of things like the Barry Leisure Centre outdoor fitness space was allowed, the landmice flooding management, the Cowbridge Leisure Centre re-roof, those issues in relation to Home View Phase 1, Givens Down. And again, that relates back to the last report, because one of the reasons for that is because there were increased costs because of all sorts of things, material in particular. I could go on. They're all there for people to read and to note. So can I just simply move that the use of the managing director's emergency powers be noted, and if everybody's got any comments to make in any of them, but they are for noting. Yes, is that agreed?
Yes.
If I may, as this is the formal noting, formally welcome Councillor Gwynjon as our carers champion. That was on this list of managed emergency powers, and I look forward to working with him as he brings his own lived perspective on how we can better support, engage, and work with carers across the community. This it's not just about, as we said before, emergency powers allows us to grab hold of opportunities with grant funding or timing so that we can do stuff ahead of school holidays, etc. But also it gives us a chance to move these appointments around. So I just wanted to particularly welcome Councillor Gwynjon into that role.
That's a fair point. I should have done it myself. Absolutely right. I'm really pleased about that. And the other thing is, in terms of this as well, is there's the addressing the food poverty and addressing food insecurity again through the hub. Liz, do you want to come in on that one?
Yes.
I thought you would.
No, I mean this is an absolutely super initiative that has established there's an initial food pod in St Luke's Avenue, which Cabinet would be aware of, where we sort of use the community pod on a temporary basis to provide support for the community, and it's been really, really successful. But I'm absolutely delighted that we've been awarded funding to actually provide a separate pod which will be adjacent to the existing one, so the existing one will go back to being a community facility, and we'll have a new food pod, hoping to get that installed very soon. I know the community are becoming quite excited about it, and we've got people from all over Penarth that have been called. I'm often there on a Friday, that have been calling in. But this week I was particularly thrilled that we've been recognised by two local organisations, Harvest Festival Collection and the Children of Victoria Primary School, and also the members of Hebron Church in Cornerswell made really generous donations to the pod this week. And it's not only the fact that they did it, but also that the people coming to the pod knew that those people were cared about them, or were interested in them. And so to be able to say to people, look at the amazing donations we've had this week. And so it's a mixture of helping people to sort of stretch their budgets a little bit further, and also helping to avoid food waste. We're linked in with the Fair Share programme, and at the moment it couldn't be going better, and I look to it being able to support more people across Penarth as the weeks and months are ahead.
Good, thank you. It's very positive, I must admit, and it was right to use emergency powers. Let's get on with it. Get on with these sort of things. That's the whole purpose of it. Okay, we're happy with noting the use of those, but very important decisions too. The next item is item 10, which is the draft response to the Welsh Government's consultation on shaping Wales' future and using national indicators and milestones to measure our nation's progress. So this is to consider it. It does seek our views on the first wave of the national milestones for Wales in assessing progress towards achieving the 7 wellbeing goals set out in the Wellbeing of Future Generations Wales Act 2015. I'm going to have to find a way of doing that quicker. There are obviously 9 national milestones, and there are proposed, as well as challenges to the set of national wellbeing indicators. The report does attach at Appendix A the Welsh Government's consultation document, and at Appendix B the Council's response, or draft response, until we approve it. And that's for submission to Welsh Government by actually tomorrow. That being the case, we will have to use the Council's Constitution 1414 in order to use the urgency procedure to send it into Welsh Government. And as I said, Future Wellbeing, Future Generations act as the 7 goals. They consulted with us. It also ran at the same time. They started this in 2019, which is one of the issues really. I think pandemics had a lot to deal with this. But I also ran a consultation to seek feedback on the first 3 years of using the National Wellbeing Indicators. And they made a number of changes informed by the consultation. They've since aligned their responsibility to the National Milestone Indicators. So what this does is consultation seeks proposals on the first wave of the milestones. Asks us for any relevant revisions in relation to the national indicators. As I said, there are 9 national milestones are proposed, as well as changes to the set of national wellbeing indicators. And those indicators are shown within the report under paragraph 2.3, and they go down things like healthy lifestyle, global footprint, pay equality, people able to speak Welsh, etc., greenhouse gas emissions, as we talked about a lot. They've also relate to the mode of travel, a minimum digital living standard, changes to indicator 33, which was a percentage of dwellings with adequate energy performance. And again, we come back to the Project Zero areas. As I said, Appendix A is the consultation document. Appendix B is our draft response. And after which, if we send this in, then Welsh Government will be debating it on in December, after which they will develop the second milestones in 2022. So basically what we've been asked to do as a Cabinet is to move the recommendations, which are the Cabinet approves this report and the contents of the Welsh Government consultation document attached to Appendix A, and approves the draft consultation response, which is Appendix B, for submission to Welsh Government by the 26th of October. And for the reason it has to be there by tomorrow, it agrees the use of the urgency decision procedure as set out in the Council's constitution. I don't know if anybody's got any comments to make in relation to this, but it's very straightforward, but we do have to get it in by tomorrow. So any comments, please? Can I formally move those recommendations?
And I'll formally second, Leader.
Okay, in that case, we're happy with that. As I said, the indicators are covered within the report itself. Thank you. In that case, I will go forward to agenda item 11, which is transforming towns support to improve town centres. And there's Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Regeneration and Education will take this piece.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, as mentioned, this is an overview of the Welsh Government's Transforming Towns programme, which, you know, in a nice, neat title like that, it sort of would suggest that it's a sort of a simple initiative. But actually, this is quite a complex range of support from Welsh Government. And if you overlay on that the fact that our towns are all very different and very diverse and have different and face different challenges, it means that we have to sort of cross-cut the various sort of support mechanisms to find the solutions that are right for them. So if Cabinet will bear with me while I try to run through the various ranges, I'll just put my recommendations to one side. So Transforming Towns, the programme was launched back in 2020, but an awful lot of the work that was done then actually was in response to the pandemic. And it's adopted the town centre first principle, so that the local authorities is in partnership with Welsh Government, and the main aim is to increase the sort of health and vibrancy of our town centres when we look around at local investment, etc. And the range of initiatives that we currently have in it is we've got the placemaking grant, and that's 2021, 2022, that's under paragraph 2.3. where it's a broad mix of capital interventions and a placemaking grant, which includes themes such as public realm, green infrastructure and active travel. So that could be looking at greening up our town centres, how our town centre actually look and work to people using them, and how people can get there, how they can reach them easily and effectively, primarily by active travel, but also probably by public transport as well. Under the previous initiative, which was a targeted regeneration initiative, the grants were available in Holton Road because that had the highest vacancy rate of just under 14%. And that continues to be the focus of this work stream to support that town centre. And the report is recommending a continuation of the delegated powers so that we can approve grant applications from eligible applicants. There is paragraph 2.8 talks about the business fund, which is the next one, which is a package of revenue support in the 5 retail areas, and that's based around three themes: to increase footfall and vibrancy in town centres, the potential for meanwhile use projects, so that is temporary initiatives to increase the vitality and vibrancy, marketing and events, and digital support, so how we can use events to come into town centres. As we've done before, we would want to do that again. Then there's a revenue fund, and we've recently been awarded a revenue grant for 2021-22 to part fund the preparation of a 20-year regeneration programme for Barry. And in that, we want to develop a forward-thinking and ambitious programme that actually brings all the various themes together. So we've actually got a cohesive strategy going forward. And we want it to be ambitious, as I said, and also innovative, looking at the various factors. And it will align with other investment opportunities, such as the Levelling Up Fund, and to be able to access more in the Transforming Towns programme of investment. Paragraph 2.11 talks about the Smart Towns initiative, and that's basically to provide us with footfall monitoring equipment in the 5 retail areas that we're working with, because historically we've had footfall counters in Holton Road and occasionally in other areas, but this means they will be installed full time, and we'll be able to see what sort of impact our initiatives have. And finally, there's a new town centre loan scheme, which is a recyclable loan scheme, and the intention is to use that within Cowbridge Town Centre, where they have a 11.6% vacancy rate in June of this year, which is the second in the Vale of Glamorgan. And we're currently preparing a funding application to submit to establish a loan scheme for third parties, where we target the owners of long-standing empty commercial properties in Cowbridge Town Centres to see if we can move those on. So this is a loan scheme, but that would chime very well with the positive comments that I've been hearing about the success of the Shoppers Car Park initiative that we developed by having sort of 2 hours free parking and then charged in the town hall car park, where people find it much easier to nip into town and find a parking space and go and do some shopping and have a cup of coffee, etc. So with the intervention of the loan scheme to bring back vacant properties alongside some of the other initiatives that we've got, I'm hopeful that will be successful. So if I can just find my recommendations. The recommendations, there are 10 recommendations, and they're laid out, and I wouldn't intend to read them all. But what I would draw attention to is the use of Article 14.14 in the Council's Constitution. That's the urgent decision procedure, for the simple reason that we want to get on and be doing these. We've got grants that we need to be applying for and bidding for. And as these various schemes go on, then they will be reported back both to Cabinet and scrutiny. So I would move the recommendations 1 to 10 before you, which includes the use of Article 1414.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's a fair point you made about coverage. If it deserves that rotating money, that's fine. It still means that we still do other things in the other areas too, which isn't as if it isn't one without the other. I'm very happy to second the recommendations. And as you say, if we can get things moving quickly, if people want to apply for grants, then we can get on with them. So I don't know if anybody's got any comments to make in relation to that, Eddie.
Yeah, I fully support this, and although you're right, the matter isn't mentioned, and it has had some investment in the last few months and made a particular difference, particularly to when people arrive in Lanchford from the railway station. So I'm really pleased just to, even though Lanchford not supported, there has been investment within this area as well. So I just don't want people from that aren't aware of that, you know, but it isn't included in the report doesn't mean that this area isn't being looked after as well.
Leader, I would need to clarify that although we haven't specifically mentioned to cut, there is actually the fact at the start of the report it talks about the 5 town centres, and all of those will be supported in various ways according to their needs. So I don't think I specifically mentioned Penarth either. There will be, in the name of whether sort of initiatives for things like the greening and the active travel and that sort of thing, events, those sorts of stuff will be across the 5 town centres. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity to clarify.
Yeah, and indeed that's covered in paragraph 2.1, which talks about all of those areas. And there's a continuation of the approach adopted in 2020. It says because the pandemic. And recovery measures, etc. So it is all our major areas. This specific money that you can rotate, for want of a better word, would probably go well in Cobridge, but it doesn't progress it from or prevent it from being coming elsewhere either at a later date. So it is a way forward. It is a way that we can continue to help business and increase footfall within our towns. So I'm very pleased that we can carry on with this. So if everybody's happy, I will move on to the next item, which is item 12, which is a part 1 report in relation to tendering progress, a process, I should say, for the housing WHQS external wall insulation refurbishment scheme for 21-22. Margaret, I think this is, as I say, is a part 1 report.
Thank you, Leader. This report seeks to advise Cabinet of the tender process for delivering of the Housing WHQS External Wall Installation Refurbishment Scheme 21-22. I mean, if you go to page 211, you can see between 2012 and 18, the Council delivered a major improvement programme to bring its housing stock up to standard. So we're moving on now and we have to carry on with more work. And so I'm asking you to support this, but there is a part 2 as well. We have to look to the future for the years to come. And so I'm asking for your support. There is only one recommendation. And as you'll see that the Cabinet notes the contents of the report with a view of taking decisions on the award of the contract. So there is a part 2, so I will leave it there for now.
Yeah, thank you, Margaret. This is just a notice for this time. It tells you what it's about, so we note it and move forward and pick it up later in part 2. Are we happy? Good. Thank you. In that case, we'll move on to item 13, which is Cowbridge Tennis Club land for new courts. And Catherine, I think you're picking this one up, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, certainly. Bringing this report to Cabinet today to seek approval for the transfer of 2 small parcels of land for the purpose of constructing 2 new tennis courts at Cowbridge Tennis Club, which will have some public access. For people who haven't read this report, they're looking to increase the capacity at the tennis courts, and they've secured necessary funds for the development and already own the majority of the land. The club's requested a long-term lease of 2 small parcels of land that are currently in the council's ownership to accommodate these 2 courts. At present, there aren't any public tennis courts at all in Cowbridge, although the club has allowed access at certain times. It's proposed in the lease restricts the use of the land for recreational use as tennis courts only, and within that lease, it states that the new courts are available for public use for 10 hours per week. It's also proposed to charge peppercorn rent due to the wider public benefits that this will be obtained by doing so. We have 6 recommendations in front of us today, which I know we've all read, but for the purpose again of people who have not, I need to make an amendment to recommendation 2. So recommendation should now read that, subject to no public objections being received, Cabinet approves the grant of a long leasehold interest for the 2 small parcels of land with a peppercorn rent of £1 per annum in Cowbridge in order to allow the construction of 2 new publicly accessible tennis courts in Cowbridge. I also need to point out that recommendations 3 to 6 are subject to recommendation 2, as much we need to obviously see if there are going to be any objections to this, to see whether we are actually going to move forward on this issue. So I would ask Cabinet's approval for this today, please.
Thank you very much. Yeah, happy to support. And as you say, it's a public open space, so we may have some comments coming back. If we don't, then obviously there's the procedures are covered by the lease of a peppercorn rent, and also obviously the necessary planning requirements too.
Yeah, and also just to point out, sorry, that all of these costs are being borne by the tennis club. None of the costs are ours at all. Indeed,
that's true. Okay, I haven't got a problem with that if it enhances the tennis facilities within Cowbridge, and the land is leased and there's no objections, then we can move forward. So if anybody's got any comments? No, do we agree? I'll formally second.
Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. No, thank you. Item 14, I don't have any urgent items under part 1, but we do have items under part 2. So we have items for discussion under part 2, which follow on from the earlier report on today's agenda. As these are matters that are considered considered confidential for particular reasons, we will need to move into private session where confidential matters can be discussed under part 2. Therefore, I would ask the Cabinet Officer to stop the recording of this open session and ensure that no members of the public are present after this juncture, and only allow the relevant parties to remain to hear the details of the items to be discussed.
Leader, before Karen does that, can I just apologise? I did take a phone call a moment ago. That's one I've been waiting for ages from the NHS for myself. So yeah. I humbly apologise. I did dip out for a little bit toward the end of the open session, and therefore just place on record that was only because it's to do with a hospital appointment I need to attend.
Okay, no, that's fine, Peter. No, you don't need to apologise at all. As I said.